All the images are, to me, they're kind of inspirations from these scenes, from these suicides. You know, I'm not saying this is what happened. You know, I've taken something written by Shakespeare and I've reinterpreted and transformed them into my vision and my meaning and my connection to those scenes. When you look at those 13 suicides, they were all for love or for passion, for honour, for pride. That led me to think about the post 9/11 climate that we live in, and suicide as an act of terrorism. But that, for me, it was really interesting and important to bring those debates, those ideas of reasons for suicide in Shakespeare, and bring them into contemporary debates. Because I've worked with myself for so long, I've had years to get used to separating. You know, they're no longer me to me, because they think, oh, you're always hiding behind these things. And for me, it's completely the other. I'm actually revealing more by putting on more. This image, which is Mark Antony, because he's such a powerful character and because the costume is actually very powerful. So I wanted to just kind of down that and make it a little bit more vulnerable, and rather putting him, you know, behind, say, iron or something texturally kind of stony, I thought the cobweb was a really nice kind of, makes him slightly more vulnerable. When I was thinking about Mark Antony's costume, simultaneously I was thinking about Cleopatra's costume. And when I was looking at pieces for Cleopatra, I was thinking, well, how does that connect with the Mark Antony? So I already knew that, you know, at some point there would be a crossover between some of the images, and I think those two in particular work really well. On Mark Antony, there's a peacock feather in his headdress, and obviously when you look at Cleopatra, she has a shawl completely draped in peacock feathers. They've both got this kind of gold, this kind of very rich, warm tones where there's a lot of gold on the costume. So you can make those kind of visual references, those visual connections, because there's been so much about Cleopatra and about, you know, what Cleopatra looked like and this famous beauty. And you know, she wasn't Liz Taylor, she wasn't Claudette Colbert. There aren't actually many images of Cleopatra as an African woman. So I thought that was not only interesting but really important to kind of get some of that into this image. I wanted this image to be the biggest, and, you know, she's the queen. And if you notice, there are only two colours on this one image, and that's green and gold. The gold because, you know, it's just gold. I mean, to me, Cleopatra is just one big gold person. Green for the poison, envy, you know, all the kind of symbolic meanings of green. And that's what the green staining is. It's kind of this kind of dispersing poison all over beyond her body, and, you know, all over the gold as well. This is Portia, and she was married to Brutus, St. Julius Caesar. She swallowed a burning lump of coal. So I wanted her really to be burning, but not in the obvious kind of flamey. You know, I didn't want to put her. I did have some flame textures, and I used them, and it was just a little bit too obvious. But I was interested in the colours of fire and what fire looks like. And when you light a cigarette, the tip is always actually quite orange. So the colour came from that kind of smoky cigarette orange that you get. Obviously, the mouth was really important on this one. The fire goes into the mouth, so the mouth had to be open, which gives me this kind of, you know, this fierce shock look. The body would go into shock. So this is Brutus, and if you notice the lion's head on Brutus's shin guard, part of his costume, is repeated on the image of Portia on her headdress. I did look at a lot of images of representations of Brutus. There's always some angel wings, or there's an angel looking over him or looking after him, or just entering the image. I thought it was a very important part of Brutus, and I couldn't do it without a version of an angel or a wing. If you look at the top, that's where the feathers come in, so there's another presence of somebody else. Again, the drama here is in the stained costume, where you can see the blood, and texturally, actually, this was one of the simple ones. I did try lots of layers on this one, and it was just not needed. This is Juliet. I wanted to keep Romeo and Juliet as pure. If white is pure, you know, I wanted them to be very white and very pure. And I wanted to use this kind of Italian marble, which I found at the British Museum. The idea was they would morph into the marble, into this pure kind of surface. I love the way the marble, the stone actually becomes the dress. The connection and what links Romeo and Juliet in these two images is the blue on the face, the tears, you know, the blue for the loss, for the longing. I wanted there to be a colour to draw you into that part of the image. There's also another connection between Romeo and Juliet, which you have to find yourself. I think you have to look at them to find them, so I'm not going to tell you what that is. This is Othello. The drama for me in this image really does come from the costume, and the detail of the costume. And if you come right up close to the image, you can see every sequin, every border, you know, all the gold around the bottom half of the image, and this fan. You know, it's very, very elaborate. Othello's another character who's been represented as being this kind of strange, exotic other. Very interesting subject for me to say, well, what do I bring to this now? And actually, I don't really need to bring anything because it's me as who I am. So I already kind of am making a dialogue about exotica, about me perceived as an exotic creature in the Western culture already. So that dialogue, not only is it happening in this particular image, but that's something I'm engaged with throughout my practice. There was something quite disturbing about lilac and green together, kind of work together in a very strange way, which is good news for me because I wanted the image to create a sense of uneasiness, a sense of not quite connected, you know, which is what Othello is. He's an outsider, he doesn't quite blend. So Eros is from Antony and Cleopatra. Very simple, very humble. I think that was part of the thing because he was Mark Antony's servant. Like Brutus, I thought when I first saw the base image of Eros, I thought there was so much going on that I didn't really need to complicate it too much. And I can reveal that this is actually only one layer of texture. There's nothing else on Eros. So this is Cassius from Julius Caesar. Cassius is a very cold, conniving, manipulative character. He's kind of hard, and I wanted this image to be just hard. I didn't want any soft lines. All his cunning plans had been found, and before they could come and get him and capture him, you know, he took his own life. A sense of pride, you know, suicide for pride, to save face. Goneril appears in King Lear, and she's a very evil character. I wanted her to look incredibly strong and incredibly fierce. We decided that she should have something very typically fairy tale, kind of Snow Queen type of appearance. I thought the blood was really important in her story, and I thought she should have that somehow visually on her, stained. So I wanted her to be stained with this blood, and some of the blood you can see on this underskirt, on this mesh, is darker because it's dried, and some of it's still very fresh. It's where Goneril is in the last scene almost. It's kind of that moment. This is Ophelia from Hamlet. Ophelia is probably a very popular character for visual artists to represent. There's lots of illustrations of Ophelia's death, Miles being the most famous one. All the images of Ophelia are actually very sensual. It's kind of half-closed eyes and, you know, this kind of surrendering, and they didn't quite reflect the text because the text is quite violent and quite disturbing. I wanted my Ophelia to look the viewer, the spectator, straight in the eyes. Hopefully you'll get that sense of actually looking into a pool of water and seeing a body in there looking right back at you. Timon was very disillusioned by life. in the play, and he goes into the wilderness. Visually, I just saw this body covered in stones and earth, and just being this kind of outline of him as part of this landscape or this surface where he's lying dead. And the reason why he's in this part of the room is also because it's in isolation. And the reason he's upside down is because I wanted to reinforce that idea of going back in the earth. So he's descending, whereas Lady Macbeth is ascending. Even though this image is crumbling and it's decaying, when you look close up, there's these kind of tiny little green shoots, these little buds, and to me that's kind of about hope. So it's not all about this kind of macabre, dark, dying, decaying body. We come to Lady Macbeth. I was interested in Lady Macbeth's madness. And her kind of fierce qualities, and to me she was kind of uber female, and she had this incredible female power, unapologetically powerful and female image, and it made me think about Eastern religions and Hinduism in particular, and the goddess image in Hinduism is all about power and strength and transformation. Ultimately it is a celebration of femininity in all its complexities. And I wanted the image to be that, complex, slightly crazy, slightly mad, iconic. There was the whole thing about traditional Christian belief. You weren't given proper burial grounds, certainly in Shakespeare's time, if you committed suicide. I wanted to kind of challenge that tradition, that idea, and place her in heaven. Everyone will find some kind of difficulty, therefore try and find a way to resolve that difficulty, and probably want to go back to the text to purely to kind of bring in some kind of connection or justification for an image like this. And I think that's absolutely fine. I think that's what the work should do.